Ahoy there folks, I'm Captain Benzie and welcome back to another video for EVE Echoes. Now today is Friday, which usually means it's a developer Q&A session, but because there's a 3-day holiday going on in China at the moment, there is no developer Q&A for this week. Now this was kind of dropped on us early this morning because, yeah, we get notified of everything literally at the very last second, but this does give me an opportunity to sit down and record a video that I've wanted to do for a long time. Now please do be aware this is literally going to be like a podcast. It's just going to be me talking. There's going to be no relevant graphics on screen or anything, if I even bother to add anything other than just an image for the entire thing. Just put this on in the background, listen to me talk, and, well, let me know in the comment section down below if you agree with what I'm saying, because essentially what I want to talk about today is where Echoes went wrong. Because I love this game. I loved this game. It was a fantastic game. It looked like it was going to break so many trends, that it was going to be a mobile game that didn't fall into the usual traps, that it was going to be something unique and special. Unfortunately, as we all know, over the past few years, that has kind of unraveled and it's become like every other mobile game ever, a pay-to-win nightmare. The only difference this time is that this time, it's also crapping all over the EVE IP. But hey, there we go. So, strap yourself in, grab yourself a drink, open up the comments section, and let me know your thoughts and opinions as we go through this together, because I've got basically 15 points noted down, and I'm probably going to think of a few more as we go. So, let's get started. Now, the first time when, in hindsight, we should have started to see that things were going to be a little bit different was actually before the game even launched. I've often cited that the first year and a half of Echoes was fantastic, and I do still stand by that. I think it's after the first year and a half that the game truly begins to go downhill. But if we step back and look at things right back to the start of all of this, you can start to see some of the warning signs. The red flags were there. And the first one of these was the horrendous nerf of small ships before going into final test. We had an open beta from December to January 2019-2020, then we had a period of nothing before eventually opening up into a final test for June-July of 2020, and then launching obviously in August. But between the open beta and final test, small ships got horrifically nerfed. And with hindsight, it's easy to see that folks had upgraded to larger ships during the tests and were confused as to why bigger simply wasn't better. In fact, I was partially guilty of this. If you watch my very first video about the Stabber during the first beta, I was a little confused as to why the sights were taking longer. It's because of tracking. Now, I didn't understand the mechanics, and at the time I was like, oh, okay, well, I'll just stick with the Destroyer, but apparently other people looked at that and went, well, why is it that the Cruiser isn't as good as the Destroyer? And it is. It was supposed to be done for different content. That, you know, you'd have higher tier anomalies that didn't have as many fast-moving frigates, and therefore, you know, the Cruiser would be the better option. It was this moment that going between open beta and final test when you could look and see that the frigates and destroyers had had massive nerfs. The cruisers had kind of been rebalanced, battle cruisers were fine, and battleships actually got buffs. We saw immediately massive tracking buffs to the battleship size weapons at the time, and this should have been a clear indication that bigger is better is the mentality they were going from. Now, the second thing I've noted down is that the tech level system. In Alpha, it was clear that this was a system that had issues. I mean, back then, during the Alpha, you actually had to have certain skills trained to tech up in general. Like, you couldn't go from Tech 5 to Tech 6 just with time. You needed to actually have certain skills, and I think one of those was like advanced mining or something, which meant even if you wanted to be a combat pilot, if you wanted to hit Tech 6, you needed to train advanced mining, which was just awful, genuinely awful. So they kind of fixed that, but still made it worse. Yes, I've written here in my notes, imagine being forced to train mining skills as a combat pilot. Now, it quickly became clear that tech progression was meant to be a stick-around reward. Unfortunately, it's also completely wrecked the game by making it so the players need to be Tech 10 in order to complete. This simply doesn't happen in EVE Online, and let me explain that. Now, in EVE Online, if you're a brand new player and you use a referral code, you've got 1 million free skill points on day one. That's enough to undock something like a Kestrel or a Tristan and jump into faction warfare and do pretty well with it. It's good enough. And yeah, okay, you might be going up against players who've been playing for 10, 20, well, almost 20 years at this point, But those people may be sitting on, say, 100 million skill points, but there are only so many skills that are actually relevant to the ship that they're flying. If you're flying a Kestrel, for example, it doesn't matter that you've got battleship tier skills or large hybrid turret skills or any of the resource harvesting or stuff like that. There are only so many skills that actually matter as a Kestrel pilot, right? And that doesn't require 100 million skill points. You know, that's actually fairly low down on the list. And also, the way that skills work in EVE Online is that essentially the 5th level of a skill costs more skill points than the first 4 levels combined, which means a lot of people only train to basic 4 in the skills. Like, you know, you have Rocket, whatever, 4. You have Caldari Frigate 4. Okay, the Frigate skills probably most people do take to 5, because even though it's more to get it to 5 than it is to get it from 1 to 4, it's still cheap. But the point I'm getting at is it's not actually that many skill points, and you're probably not going to be that far behind most people that you go up against. Like, if I'm undocking a Kestrel as a day 1 player, my skills aren't that far off someone who's undocking a Kestrel as a 10-year player. The difference is that they have a lot more knowledge in how the game works than I do. But if, for example, I rolled a new account knowing how the game works, I could still get good fights. I could still get really good fights. That's simply not the case in EVE Echoes. In EVE Echoes, if you're a day 1, day 2 player, basically the first month you can fly anything up to Tech 7. After that, yeah, it's a long time to get to Tech 8, Tech 9, or Tech 10, so you're kind of stuck in this situation where I could be flying a Slasher, everyone else is going to, or Slasher 2, everyone else is going to be flying a Slasher 2 Interceptor, which is just hands down a better ship. And by the time I hit Tech level 7, I can actually have all of the frigate skills trained all the way up to Expert 4, Expert 5, but I still can't undock the best frigates, because it's a purely arbitrary gating system. It's a purely arbitrary system that just gates the content off from players, and it means nothing. Like, I wouldn't mind a tech level system that unlocked stuff relevant. Like, if you wanted to fly a Slasher 2 Interceptor, yeah, you should have to train expert frigate skills, and then it would unlock it that way. I'm not saying do away with tech levels completely and let, like, level 1, you know, brand new first day players undock a Typhoon 2 or, you know, a carrier or something, but having the progression meaning something rather than just, oh, you've waited for 10 months while paying for a mega, because that's what it is right now. And it's that fact that essentially you need to be all the way up at tech level 10 in order to even compete anymore. It really pushes away new players, and that is a really bad point. Now, the third point I've noted down is the market. Being able to see this from anywhere has had a profound impact on the game by essentially centralizing all of the markets into one location, Jita. This creates an everyone versus everyone style market where every single seller is in competition with every single other seller. It also pretty much sounded the death knell of hauling, since nothing ever needs to be shifted around. Imagine basically, you know, you can sit there in nullsec and you can open up the market and you can buy from Jita and you can autopilot there completely safely, you can autopilot completely safely back. But because it's all one market, it is literally everyone versus everyone. I, as a newer player, can't try and find a niche to undercut and slot into somewhere. Like in EVE Online, I could start selling stuff at Heck because, you know, it's a little bit different to selling it at Jita, selling it at Do-Dixie or Amar or Rents or whatever. We don't get that in Echoes. It's all one market, all one station, which means everyone's competing, which means just whoever has the basic skills or the longest time to sit in game and grind gets everything, and no one else gets anything. And that has really sucked the life out of industry. And this does twin in with that autopilot offline. Now, this is a system that I really enjoy, and I think it does benefit Echoes massively. At first, it wasn't really an issue at all either. This only became noticeable when interceptors became readily available and popular. Being able to offline autopilot through high-sec or low-sec, not an issue to me at all. It's just the ability to autopilot with almost certain safety through null-sec provides too much safety. Again, this was the nail in the coffin of hauling, as even null-sec players could easily move to and from Jita with little worry. But essentially, null-sec is supposed to be dangerous. Ships are supposed to be destroyed, and by having ships destroyed, you have then ships that need to be replaced and built, and that keeps industry going. We don't have that in Echoes because nothing gets destroyed because it's way too safe. This leads into insurance. Now, I maintain that insurance isn't the biggest problem with industry, and I do maintain it's not the biggest industry. Is it a big problem? Yes, it is, but does fixing that on its own? Yeah, I don't know. I really don't know. But essentially, it's certainly the most obvious problem, for sure. Now, regardless, this was the first sign that industry was essentially an afterthought to the developers, and perhaps even competition to the ability to swipe your wallet. The introduction of insurance points as a system that you could just swipe for to get your ship back certainly basically gave us this weird dichotomy between, do I swipe to get a ship back, or do I pay an industrialist to get a ship back? That's the biggest problem with industry, and with insurance, and I don't think a lot of people talk about it like that. I don't know. I still don't think it's the biggest problem, but it definitely was a strong nail in the coffin of industry, and it does need changing. I've said this before, it needs changing. But there's so much in industry that needs changing, and I do honestly think that it's just that NetEase looks at industry as competition for you swiping your credit card, and thus they're never going to fully implement it. Even if our development team want it, the higher-ups are never going to allow it to happen. Now, the next point I've made is lack of PvE. Around about Tech 7, running Tech 10 overseas was tough and required a fleet. We had lucrative, challenging content. Unfortunately, the Tech 10 arms race and power creep has made most PvE menial, because it was never truly iterated on. Now, you'll notice that this lack of iteration becomes a running theme in my notes here. Essentially, PvE has been the same since the start of the game. It's warp to site, shoot everything, warp to next site, shoot everything. And the AI of the rats is terrible. It's easy to exploit. Frigates fly at you in a straight line. They don't try and move around you. They don't try and flank you. And quite frankly, even if they did, a couple of webs in your set these days. PvE is boring. And rather than try and fix PvE, they've now given you a way to pay to automate it. And yeah, it's that lack of iteration, I think, becomes a big running theme in this game. There's a lot you could do to make PvE more interesting, like gating different anomalies to different size ships, using acceleration gates so that you are forced in at 0, rather than being able to warp in at 100 and just snipe everything. There's a lot of problems with PvE, and probably way too many to get into individually in this video, or it's going to be an hour long, half of which is just me talking about how to fix PvE. I've talked about all this in other videos, so, keep an eye out and check what I've said in those ones, I guess. Then we have infinite potential faucets. EVE has always been a sandbox, characterised by its player-driven economy and market. Now, unfortunately, Echoes has several infinite potential faucets. Now, in basic terms, this is when the game has the potential to infinitely spawn materials. So the more players are farming content, the more materials are harvested into the economy with no upper limit. Now, this is found in ISK harvesting through near-infinite ratting income, with modules being dropped from those same sites, which also provides an infinite potential faucet of reprocessing materials, and with ores, with infinitely respawning belts. This has absolutely flooded the game with ever-increasing ISK, inflating market prices and plex, infinite module supply, which floods the market, driving their values down, and infinite ores, which does the same thing and pushes industry further to the brink by leaving ores practically valueless. Even the addition of new sinks cannot fix this. The supply must be addressed. And the reason that the new additions cannot fix this is because, think about it, you can sit there and say, oh, we're adding new station upgrades, and they're going to cost you 90 billion ISK worth of stuff. Yeah, why do you want to build that? You want to build it because it gives you quality of life upgrades afterwards. So you spend 90 billion, and then the new quality of life upgrades help you farm that 90 billion back quicker than it was before. So you haven't sunk any ISK, you've just temporarily got rid of it, and now you're actually helping people to gain even more than they had before. And it's the same with ore sinks. Look at the Rorqual. The Rorqual is a humongous ore sink, but it's a one-off. Once you've built a Rorqual, you are then harvesting infinitely more ores than you were before. So you've spent all of that ores, but now you're using that thing to gain even more than you had in the first place. If you don't see that as a problem, I don't know what to suggest, but there is a reason that EVE Online has an actual team of economists that help set up its economy. Echoes doesn't, and it's clear that they don't care about this. Scanning is the next one I've got notes on, but not for the reasons that some of you may be thinking. Now, scanning was meant to provide danger and risk to storyline runners who were essentially printing ISK in Bad Hair Day. Jump into Bad Hair Day, farm the entire site completely safely, use that ISK to buy another Bad Hair Day plus a load of profit, and just keep going. Now, all this did was chase those players into completely safe high-sec islands like Claralam. Printing ISK has always been an issue due to how it causes inflation in the game, but scanning was so poorly implemented with so little counterplay that it just cemented high-sec and null-sec as the two options. Completely killed low-sec. Because nullsec, if you are deep enough in your own Empire space, is completely safe. Like, if you're out ratting in a carrier and someone says, hey, there's a load of hostiles moving down the pipe towards us, you dock up and you never lose a ship. Or Claralam, it's not as, lucrative, you don't earn as much ISK in high sec as you do low sec, but it is 100% safe. Like, there is no real way to lose your ship, unless you are literally an idiot and just warp to a site, switch everything off, put your phone down and walk away and put the kettle on. So, there's no risk. There's no risk there anymore in those two positions, and it's because scanning was so risky in the middle ground. Low sec is completely dead, and it polarized everyone to either high sec or null sec. Yeah, way to go. No counterplay. There needed to be some kind of meaningful counterplay in there, and there just never was. Now, lack of iteration, I've mentioned, is a point that comes up time and time again. Nihilist dead space, Nihilist compressed space, faction war games, exploration, heck, even the basic encounter system. These are all the starts of awesome gameplay mechanics and systems, but due to how NetEase works, with random teams assigned to work on the game, nothing ever gets actually iterated on. Each of these still exist almost identically to how they were at the start, which means they're rarely utilised since they're now just made irrelevant by every new thing that comes out. Think about it. By the time you upgrade to the next tier, all the previous stuff is completely forgotten about, right? Which means we have a ton of redundant content in the game. It would be easy to go back and just fix a load of these things. Make this content exciting, make it engaging, give it a purpose, but it's never going to happen. I mean, a key example of this is something like the Crimson Harvest, frequently considered to be the best event that NetEase ever ran, only to never be run again, never be utilised again. Crimson Harvest was an excellent event that had players interacting and pushing new exciting content. Unfortunately, it wasn't easily monetized, and had bad experiences for those in high sec who would often be ratting the sites only to have the loot ninjaed. Now, rather than try and fix this by looking at how you could change this and work on it, no, because NetEase never iterate, only add new content, it's been roundly ignored, and we just try something new. It's the approach of basically throwing something else onto the fire and hoping that reignites everything. And it's how NetEase as a company operates. It's not just for EVE Echoes. Look at any NetEase game ever, and it is pretty much what they do on those. It's just sad that in Echoes, it really damages the game. In some other games, it works, like adding new modes, adding new gameplay, adding new weapons. If you're looking at something like adding, Knives Out, new gameplay modes, new weapons, new skins, just stuff that you can slap on and add in, works. In Echoes, it doesn't, because of how the game works. Now, nanocores are next on my list. This was a big one. Prior to launch, NetEase had promised, in fact, that Omega was the only necessary payment and that any other payment would never be tied to stats or gameplay. This was a promise that they literally put in writing, that because this was going to be an unusual game in requiring a monthly subscription to run, that's how they were going to monetize it. They didn't need pay-to-win mechanics. And for like a year and a half, they held to that. Until nanocores. And suddenly that was the big broken promise. Big broken promise. Now, at first, these were poised to be something exciting that players would build themselves. We would go into the new Nihilist dead spaces, grab these materials, and build these nanocores ourselves. It was an industrial thing. Unfortunately, they quickly became the selling point of Concord passes and the rewards for hugely lucrative and predatory lucky box events and interstellar bazaars. This isn't even mentioning that so many having abilities or modes that would utterly destroy game balance. I'm looking at Glaze mode. Like, what is that? Press a button to ignore game mechanics. That's just literally an enticing pay-to-win function that is there purely to get people to spend and buy the next big exciting thing. We've got a new Interstellar Bazaar going on right now. Can you buy any of it in-game? No. You have to use Aurum. In fact, the freaking free boxes that you get each day still require you to make an actual payment to unlock them, or they're hot garbage. You want the actual skins rather than the timed ones, or just random materials that are worthless. Yeah, you have to buy keys for Aurum, not even for Plex, for Aurum. Which means even the free stuff is locked behind paywalls. And this would be a running theme. Battleships, implants, capitals, pushing these together because they're emblematic of the same thing. NetEase and the bigger is better approach. For years, Echoes laboured with battleships, simply being able to do everything better than other ships could. They were a simple goal for pretty much all pilots. Pick a battleship, aim for that, and that's what you would aim for. They were the simple goal for pretty much every pilot in the game, and NetEase focused them almost exclusively for literally years. Unfortunately, what we originally thought to be just bad game design ended up being entirely intentional. Get everyone to follow the bigger is better approach, get them to upgrade one ship, only to move the goalposts back and introduce the next bigger is better thing for folks to buy and train into, get an upgrade nanocores for, etc. This is the business now. This is the entire reason for Eve Echoes. That is the gameplay loop. Basically, as soon as you're maxed out to the end of the game, they push the end further back and then charge you more for it. Enjoy your supercarriers and titans. Essentially, congratulations, you've maxed out a battleship. Cool. You think you're at the top of the game? Nope, we're going to add carriers and dreadnoughts. Now you're going to have to spend more on nanocores for them. You're going to have to grind more for those. Oh, what's that? You've nearly maxed those out? Well, here's implants. Good luck maxing those out. Oh, you've nearly maxed that out? Well, here's supercarriers. Oh, you've nearly maxed that out? Here's titans. That is the entire gameplay loop now. They dangle the new, exciting, big end game in front of you. And then you buy into it, and the costs are more expensive than they were last time. It's always more expensive than it was last time. And then suddenly, as soon as you think you're done with that, the next big thing comes out, and the cycle continues. Corporations clash, the AI nanocore, etc. The sunken cost fallacy is what I've actually put this one under. Now, rather than fixing the game, NetEase have decided to simply stop listening to what players want and have started telling them instead. This has resulted in half-baked, practically useless implementations. Rather than simply apologise or even just quietly moving on, NetEase doubles down and starts fixing these additions by throwing even more resources at them. Development time that could be used fixing the real issues with the game is instead spent incentivizing players to use systems and mechanics that they never wanted or asked for in the first place. The AI nanocore is a great example of this. Rather than make the gameplay interesting, no, we're just going to sell you a way to automate it. And then when that doesn't work, we're going to spend a load of time and effort getting that actually fully functional. And then we're going to add all these other new things in that make that the next big thing to spend into as well. Because now you need to buy all these upgrade materials and all these nanocores get consumed and. Same with Corporations Clash. That was added as a PvP mode that would have no destruction in it, and no one started using it. No one used it. And then they started incentivizing it. Hey, come and do this. We'll do tournaments in it. We'll do this. We'll add prizes into it. They added something that nobody wanted, and then when nobody used it, instead of just going, oh, well, okay, oops, maybe we should start listening, no, they try to incite us to use it, incentivize us to use it. We say we don't want this, they go, yeah, you do, and you're going to use it anyway, because that's all there is now. Yeah. Finally, refusal to address any of these issues, and this is ultimately the biggest one. Because of the aforementioned unwillingness or inability, depending on your generosity, to iterate on anything previously added to the game, each of these issues has steadily grown in scope and expanse over the duration of the game's lifespan. What may have been minor and easily addressable concerns have now ballooned into individually game-breaking issues that have clustered together into the sprawling omni-shambles that we now recognise as Echoes. The tech-level system. It would have been such an easy thing to fix to incite new players to come into the game and stick around. But now, add that with the whole bigger is better approach and the fact that everyone has bought into that, because they have pushed people and told people your battleships are the best things to have. Oh, now carriers and dreadnoughts are the best things to have. Oh, now super carriers are the best things to have. If they were to actually go back and balance the game, they've lied again. And that risks pushing even more players out of the game. They could try and fix industry. But it's too late now, because industry is completely broken to the point where people are used to just spending money, and thus NetEase makes more money by not fixing industry. Each of those 15 points is, in itself, a big problem. But the fact that they then clump together, they all hook into each other, makes this a game that really is now going to struggle to ever stay alive. I was talking in the CC chat with some of the guys recently. I won't mention names, but honestly, I don't think people are idiots. And people sit there and go, oh, you keep calling us idiots. No, I say you act like idiots. You act ignorant. And I know people are better than that. But people sitting there saying, oh, well, the content creators need to be positive. The content creators need to be positive because this game is dying. No. I'm not going to lie to my audience. And the idea that I should sit back and go, oh, this game's hunky-dory, totally come and join it. I'd be selling myself out. Like, geez, there's a reason I didn't take the Raid Shadow Legends sponsorship, right? Just, when it comes down to it, rather than getting angry that I'm talking about how bad this game is, get angry that they made the game bad. Instead of sitting there saying, oh, why are there so few players? Oh, it's because Benzie's ranting about how awful the game is. No, I'm telling you that the players are leaving because the game is this bad. It's hit this point where people are done. People have waited 3 years for small ship content, and the small ship content update they did was cruisers, 4 battleships, super carriers, and a new carrier. That's not small ship content. We've been ignored. Remember when they said they were adding station containers and the ability to rename your ship 3 months ago? Where's that? They lied to us again. They told us it was in the next update. It's been 3 months. It's not the next update. How many things have been quietly removed from the Trello? How many things have they said that they're working on and just haven't arrived? We're coming up to the 3rd anniversary of the game. We still don't have the Yanjung, literally the poster child of Echoes. Just instead we get anime freaking nanocores. The things we're actually asking for, things that would actually fix the game, they don't care about anymore. They're never going to. And I'm not going to sit here and tell you, oh, this game's fantastic, you should come and join in this game and have fun. You can still have fun in this game. People do still have fun in this game, but that's in spite of what the developers are doing. And sitting there doing this dumbass argument, and I'm going to call Rambo out on this one, because he sits there and says, oh, well, I'm having fun, so the game can't be that bad. You're one person. You figured out how to have fun. Awesome. Great for you, genuinely. Great for you. I'm glad you are still enjoying the game. But you're one person. And you are having fun in spite of the problems with the game, not because of them. Yeah, this is a sandbox. Players are supposed to create their own content, but a sandbox game needs to give players tools. Like, you can't just open up EVE Online and then never have a single cosmic anomaly appear. You know, wormholes don't exist. It's just, it's a bunch of empty space. Players need tools. They need tools to interact with. And Echoes has incredibly limited tools. Your number one tool in Echoes is your credit card. That's what NetEase want you to use. This isn't a sandbox anymore. It's a theme park. NetEase want you to come in and pay them to do the things that they are telling you are going to be fun. It's not like EVE Online where they turn around and go, oh cool, we've added these new sites, we've added these new ships, they're completely free in-game, go find them, go have fun with those and let us know how you get on. These new Homefront systems, these Homefront dungeons that have just been added to the game. Heck, the Shadowcaster Ship War, when they added all the new hacking sites that are only available to Tier 1 explorers, new salvage opportunities, new faction warfare, all this kind of thing. They're tools. It's not content, it's tools to enjoy the game. And games do need that. You can sit there and say, oh, Echoes is a sandbox, it's a sandbox, it's a sandbox, and act like that's an excuse for the developers not providing anything for you to do, but it's bullshit. You need to have tools. Otherwise, you're just sitting in a box of sand. You need to have a bucket, a spade, maybe a bit of water. You need to have access to these things in order to create something worthwhile in that sandbox. And Echoes, we've got an amazing community, despite the fact the developers have been hammering away at us for years. Despite the fact the developers don't care about us. Despite the fact that we have had to work against the game, not alongside it. This game doesn't deserve this community. And I'll keep shouting out about that until eventually either the developers realise or the players realise. Because right now it's just Stockholm Syndrome. Anyway, folks, those are my thoughts and opinions about Echoes. Nice long podcast-style video here for you to dive into. Would love to know your thoughts and opinions in the comment section down below. I'm sure we'll probably get a developer Q&A double whammy next week, where they'll do like 5 or 6 questions, but we'll have to see. I'm also noticing dev Q&A video views are beginning to go down a bit, so there is going to come a point, probably sooner rather than later, where I simply let go of Echoes completely. I'm still trying to bring myself to get the Chameleon video done and dusted and released, and same with the Science C video, but it's becoming harder and harder just to log into a game because it reminds me of what this game could have been, and that kind of stings. Anyway, folks, thank you for watching this one right the way through to the end. I'd love to hear your thoughts and opinions. Otherwise, happy sailing, and see you in New Eden.